Hello, welcome to Live with Adelene Cheong on Facebook Live and Instagram Live. Today, the topic that I'd like to share with you or have this conversation is about self-practice and how do we keep our self-practice, especially during this time, how do we keep our self-practice creative, interesting, and most importantly, nourishing? How do we qualify that, each of our practice, every time we step onto the mat, that it is nourishing experience and serving of what we need in that moment. So welcome, a few of you are just joining. Hi Baroness, hi Amy, Jamie, hi. So as I was saying earlier, I would like to share with you a couple of things that has worked for me and how I inspire or probably maintain a refreshing practice that is always serving and nourishing in the moment. And I'll also cover how we could also attend to potentially physical experiences and nourishment, as with emotional, mental, spiritual nourishment in our practice. Okay, hi friend. Yeah. So firstly, I'd like to say, what is self-practice? Like, what is self-practice? What's the difference between that and attending a class with a teacher and in a studio or online maybe? Over the years, I've really drawn a lot of insights, inspiration, and ideas from classes, from workshops, from different teachers, which is really helpful, grateful. And I find that when I'm in a class, I'm actually probably collecting some information in terms of how another person would approach the movement or approach the practice. It is coming out or born out of the teacher or that person's experience with the pose or with the movement, which then is being shared in a group class or in a studio class with the teacher. And I find that it's really refreshing to see how another person interpret or approach the movement or pose, whilst where I could truly nourish myself, for example, even being at the pace that I'm ready and willing to be in a movement or engage in a pose, it has to come from a place when I'm able to self-practice in my own time, space. I'm deciding how the body is sensing, feeling, and therefore responding from moment to moment, whether the movement continue to nourish me or should I choose a modification or to move on to another shape or position or movement. What I'm seeing is when I'm offering a class, when I'm teaching myself, that I'm sharing what has been through in my body in terms of my practice experience with my student. And therefore the student is really practicing my practice, practicing what my body and my practice has been through, and therefore I'm sharing that, hopefully that inspire and spark whatever creativity that is already within the student's practice experience. And it is really helpful, especially as guide ropes initially, to have that suggestion or probably assurance from teachers, from workshops, from classes that we attend. And know that that again needs to be digested within our own experience. So firstly, now I'd like to maybe just ask if anyone could share what do you understand by self-practice? What do you find difficult or challenging or idea about self-practice for you. Yeah. Hi, hello. Yeah, everyone. Yeah, so one of the things, okay. So one of the things that I find that I could be practicing when in the morning or afternoon by myself, that is often very refreshing because I get to choose also how much time I spend in my practice, whether that is a 10-minute practice or an hour and a half practice, that each time I get onto my mat, each time I meet and approach my practice, that it is a nourishing experience. It is always exciting and refreshing to be on my mat. Getting distracted by the phone, yep. So there are things that I'm going to suggest in a moment also that would support us in terms of how we put a boundary as to how you would also set aside an appointment time for yourself, for your self-practice. So not thinking of how to teach students instead of focusing on embodied experience. Yeah. So especially for some of us who teach, especially those teachers, that trust that as you embody your practice, just go ahead and do your practice, that will translate into a somatic experience through words when you teach. So know that when you actually stand in front of a group of students and you're teaching, that it is not something that you have premeditated and memorized. A lot of times that comes out from your innate wisdom that you have experienced, translated, and therefore shared in that moment. And it changes from moment to moment, every class. Every time you come to expressing downward facing dog, which is one of the more common poses in almost every yoga class, that expression and energy behind that expression is different. Yeah, it comes from your living body in that moment. Yeah, well, living in a studio with your partner can be quite tricky when self-practicing. Yeah, there are other beings that share the same space with us, and as with phone distraction, as with maybe even email distractions, having your computer or laptop close by within reach and accessible, that we will need to put a boundary, set a boundary for ourselves as to, okay, this is how I approach it. So if you allow me to share. When I sat down this morning in preparation for this live session, I sat down, and the moment I sat down, I noticed that there is some unsettling emotion that this is one of the days. Last week we just talked about emotional fluctuations. And this is one of the mornings that I have been having some emotional turbulence. And that also manifests in my physical body. So I'm observing some tension in my mid-back, lower back. And before I even put my hands onto the keyboard and start like writing or typing, I literally roll back behind me, lie down, and observe, listen, meet myself. And in fact, the mental thought that was crossing my mind in that moment was, only unless I have practiced and satisfy my body in terms of physical, emotional, mental readiness, then I'm allowed to put my hands and fingers on the keyboard and start writing. It's instead of, okay, I'll finish this email, then I'll do my practice. This is one of the things that I've really set up for myself. Unless I've practiced, then I'm allowed to reply that email. Then I'm allowed to sit in front of my computer. Does that resonate with some of you? Does that help in terms of shifting perspective of how we see or view your self-practice? Yes, yes, yeah. Okay. So let's talk about what is a creative practice. I use the word creative practice. Somewhat you can interchangeably say that it's a refreshing practice. So it's not a mundane one that you have kind of planned out and sequenced out and repeat every time or every day, every time you get onto the mat. Or sometimes it could literally be a shorter practice versus a longer practice, depends on the time that you have allocated. Practice first, and from that place live your day. Yes, I agree. Steph, yes, completely agree. Go within first, Baroness. Yeah. So creative, the word creative to me means that it's born out from the heart, not from the head. That's creativity. Creative to me also means that it's changing perspective. So it's not a typical usual pattern that we are engaging in or repeating. Creative also means traveling or choosing along the path of least planned or least anticipated or premeditated. So when I come onto my mat, how do I know where to go? How do I have a refreshing experience or interesting? Interesting just means that it's maybe some surprises, unpredictability within it, and therefore it's interesting, right? So interesting really relates to how creative also we can bring onto our mat, bring our attention onto the mat. So I'm hoping that in a moment when I guide you through at least the beginning, the starting of the practice, how to consolidate and meet ourselves where we are before we even consider, listen, and also respond to what am I choosing in the next second, next minute in my practice. So I set my alarm to practice before family rise. Yeah. So in terms of boundaries and protecting your personal space for practice, especially if you're living in a house full of other beings, practicing early in the morning when everyone's still in bed. I really appreciate that time for my meditation practice. Sometimes I still can manage in terms of movement practice when there are people around in the house. But for my meditation practice, it's just that level of stillness in the air, in the environment that you're in, right? Yes, of course, there are still movement of the world, of the outside world that we are sitting and observing, in fact, the fluctuations of all this that's arising and dissolving from moment to moment. Hi, Rachel. Yeah. Hi, Nadia. So that's creative to me. Creative also means experimental. Experimental meaning it's of, again, not born of something that you have planned for. You're experimenting what works, what doesn't work. You might try it a little bit, a small dosage of this movement or the other direction that you're heading, so that you can experiment with how the body responds or how your emotional and mental being respond to that experiment or that movement. It's also an expression. Creativity to me is also an expression which is spontaneous. It's in the moment that you could really call that a instantaneous response and creativity in the moment. It's not something that you have already have it in pen and paper from from yesterday or from before. And now the word that I have been thinking about when I was planning this is also a nourishing experience. Hi, Catherine. So, nourishing experience. So creativity is one, refreshing experience, exciting, interesting experience is one. But nourishing, how do I serve myself physically, emotionally, and mentally? I'm talking about how do I serve myself in that moment, meet myself in that moment, and able to feel satisfied with my practice. That my practice is actually nourishing a part of me, or heal a part of me when I'm on my mat. And this is again something that I would practically experiential practice when we have in a moment, that I'll like to share with you, how I check in with myself, how I attend to, or probably even listen attentively to what my body has to say, what my where my mental state is in this moment, how my emotional fluctuation is manifesting itself in the moment as I come to design or move forward in my movement practice. Hi, James. Lack motivation. Yes, that's a big word. Yes, I definitely have written the word motivation down. In terms of motivation to practice, firstly, maybe I'd like to ask, what initially brought you to yoga? When you first decided that you're going to be joining this yoga class, or probably attending your first ever yoga studio class, what is your motivation at that time that brought you, that made that decision and choice to show up in a yoga class? Listening to the body and responding to it intuitively. Yes, definitely. Yeah, intuitively, and therefore creativity. Yeah. So what's your motivation as you come to your practice? Hi, Jenny. Yeah, so reorganize the living room to use as your yoga room. So that it's a really great idea to cordon off the space for yourself, as like that is your claimed space for practice and sanctuary for yourself. Curiosity, need a break, yeah, from babies. Wanted to feel different. So wanted to feel different is a really interesting statement, that there are maybe something that the body, mind, or emotionally that one might be experiencing that is not as satisfying, or feels depleted, and therefore we desire to feel something else than what is happening to our body. Whilst I might agree and disagree, there are some moments where I see that as a great motivation to change, to move into another direction or dimension of experiencing my day or my life. But also, especially in my yoga nidra practice, it's also really interesting that I observe what I'm resisting and not liking in my current moment experience, and choosing a response to meet that. If there is an underlying hidden message that the body or the emotional experiences is showing up again and again that needed my attention, and how to respond to it. Yeah. Hi, Jen from Singapore. Yeah. Barbara. So I would like to talk about now in terms of, yes, motivation. A moment ago, one of the greatest motivation, or at least sharing from my experience, I was saying, is maybe pain, emotional discomfort and pain that I'm attempting to dissolve or find some harmony within my experience, within my body. So some of you, many of you know that I live with scoliosis, and that for years, during my teenage years, through my 20s and all, before I meet yoga, it's just really depleting, and not just physically depleting, it's so tiring to just carry this body around and move around with in asymmetry. But it's also mentally, emotionally depleting, because it feels like I need to find someone to help me to fix myself, to fix this body, than me having the authority or power to be able to support myself. So it's really disconcerting emotionally and mentally as well, just living with the condition. So that might be the motivation initially when I came to yoga. And for some of you might have a different motivation. And let's talk about as of now, even this motivation to get onto the mat may continue to shift and change from day to day. So this morning's motivation for me could be simply needing a little bit more groundedness and soothing my lower back and mid back maybe. And that is motivation or intention. Let's put it that way. There's an intention to it, to encourage me to get onto my mat. Yeah. Yes, to the last thing, working with emotional pain of the situation. What we feel, we can heal. What we resist, persist. Yes, Kathy. Yeah. Your reason for getting onto the mat, the way in which I practice, has changed so much in recent weeks. Yes. Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Jen. And especially when we listen attentively, and when we are able to listen to the body, the mind, the expression of our emotional state in that moment, that our practice naturally reinvent itself to support the moment's need for nourishment and fulfillment. Yes, yeah, scoliosis. Now, I appreciate that there may be some students of yours, some of you are teaching, and some of our students or some of you here might find it initially, especially at the beginning, a little disoriented in terms of where do I start? Yes, I hear you, and teacher often say, listen to your body, listen to listen to your breath and all, but where do I begin? I mean, there are moments, especially in the initial phase when I come to yoga, that I'm just lost for ideas. I just needed a little bit of suggestion and ideas and maybe guide ropes initially to feel that little bit more confident, or until I feel I can trust myself maybe. Initially, it might be more of a trust issue that I don't know where I am, and therefore I don't know where to start and where to go. And in those moments, and again, I relate to this, can be literally translated into my experience with scoliosis, which is for someone living with a asymmetry which is disorienting in itself. Where do I feel symmetrical? Where do I feel balanced? Am I standing straight? I needed often to every now and then as well now that some external reference, something that could help me navigate from the outside. Now, that could be in the form of props, the wall, the floor, gravity, to give me that reference as to where I am in space, to navigate around and orientate before I could even just creatively come up with a movement sequence. And that could be also external referencing, could also be guidance from another person, a teacher, who has a non-judgmental and also welcoming, meeting you where you are, offering you objective feedback as to what they observe rather than what you should be doing. So that is also helpful to have that witness, having another person to share their insights and what they see in your practice. So external references and guide ropes like so, it's helpful. It's definitely helpful for a lot of people until we feel that little bit more confident to experiment ourselves. So the stages of competency, and this is not just for yoga. I think there are quite a few modalities who agree with this transition of learning. The first stage, often when a student is what I've described earlier, or in the past when I've first come to yoga, when I'm disoriented as to what my body needs, where I am in my experience. There's a little lack of awareness or body sensitivity. That is a state where we call unconscious incompetence. So unconscious incompetence, from there, because of that desire, because of that motivation of wanting change, of wanting to feel more in harmony of our body, that becomes that allows us to explore further, maybe investigate or research or read more about or listen to other people, or get inspiration from teachers and other peers. And then we move into conscious incompetence. So we are conscious that there is something that we could potentially improve or to introduce into our being, practice and living. Then from there, as we continue to pursue with a little bit of guide ropes, that it moves into conscious competence. So we're still consciously having to refer sometimes, but at least we're competent to make that choice or to trust ourselves a little bit more in our practice. So conscious competence and eventually unconscious competence. And that's where naturally innate within your inner wisdom, you within the inside, your light within, is navigating with competence, with that assurance and trust that you have the final answer of like a final decision making, despite someone might suggest something, maybe that could be in a class or another person or some external information that we receive. Whilst we have the authority and assurance and trust and within ourselves to feel competence to be able to make that move forward or choosing movement in our practice. And I, for one, was really fortunate that over the years, my teacher, and I quote Donna Frari is my longtime teacher. I've been studying with her for close to 2 decades now, and she has offered me so much space for my growth that only retrospectively, years after that, I've noticed that her not answering every question that I have, which I have a lot of questions about every other pose with my scoliosis and all, that she has given me the opportunity and space for me to ask myself within before I keep grasping and asking for assurance from the outside. there are moments where she would give me one or two ideas or suggestions, but very minimal, so that there is still space and opportunity in that moment for me to slowly regain some trust within myself, not to take away that self sovereignty within, which is really powerful. That's really empowerment that we want to talk about in yoga. That's empowering. Unconscious competence, yes, friend, yeah. And in fact, I find that when I'm when I'm teaching students also, that for me to actually just give them the answer, like, okay, just put your right foot here and just bend your knee here and reduce the range of movement here, and that is actually much easier and faster for me to actually engage and just give the answer, and or maybe literally just reorganize their position of their arm or where they put their feet, than to actually hold back. I actually had to hold back and notice the ego within me that wants to suggest or to give that answer to the student, whilst as I hold back, I'm really observing myself, slowing down myself, and allowing the student to have their precious moment. That is really the keystone moment where the student has an opportunity to gain that little bit of trust as they experiment, as they become a little bit more creative in exploring their body through sensation. Yeah, Catherine, thank you. Yeah. So it's over. Of course, this takes time. Initially, it might be a little bit more of like half external referencing, half assurance from the outside, or maybe use of props or support of a teacher. Then to allow yourself to have that moment, that space to listen attentively and respond and choose in small doses, so that you can slowly gain a little bit more trust in your practice and information that the body is showing up with. Right? Guidance without control, yes. Autonomy without abandonment, yes. That's really beautifully put, Jen. Yeah, that's really nice. That really allows the student then to grow at their own pace and to allow them to really see their inner light and their inner wisdom within. Yeah. So I would like to offer you the practice now, and like I mentioned earlier, now this is not a class, and I would like to invite your understanding and your agreement that everything I suggest, words included, are optional, and that at any point you need to take a pause, rest, and simply breathe and not move. Just stay there, and I'll repeat and say that again during our practice. But more importantly, I'd like to share with you how I begin my practice and how I find and connect to that creativity side, and noticing also the motivation and intention of the practice as I begin, as I just lie down the first 10 seconds, first minute of my practice. And how do I attend to my practice or reinvent my practice in a way that it is most nourishing and delicious each time, regardless whether that's a 10-minute thing or a 2-hour thing that I'm going to be on my mat. So I've learned that in your class with me. As a student, is a series of suggestions. Yeah, series of suggestions. So if you're ready, now I'm going to suggest you can have any variety of props around you that you think you might use, might want to use later, and you might change your mind and be willing that that might change too. But firstly, simply come into a comfortable position, a position where you feel it's welcoming for you to the practice. Okay, bye Jen. Yeah. And that could be a seated position, lying down position, standing position. But make this a conscious choice as you move into this position. And I'm gonna just move a little bit away from the screen and move back and offer you what, like as I was continue speaking, as I offer you how I navigate the beginning of my practice, at least for the first 10 minutes, and how then that could be taken into more creative exploration and choosing practices, movement that is nourishing. So if you're ready, yep, okay. It could be as restorative or as active as you want. Some of you might be doing your inversion, some of you might be staying pretty much on the floor, on the ground for most of the time. And that's the interesting part. That's the creativity part that I'm going to be introducing and inviting you to listen and respond and choose appropriately. Right? So let's find a comfortable position, a position that would welcome you to your practice. And for me, often I either like to not immediately stand unless I'm out and about in the park or something. I like to be close to the ground, to feel grounded, to feel to be able to touch the ground. Now, whether that is seated or lying on my front or lying on my back. So I'm gonna start with maybe in a semi-supine position with my knees bent, lying on my back, with minimal to no props. If you would like a little blanket as a pillow for your head, feel free to use that. But for now, simply I'm just allowing my body space, allowing every cell in my body to settle. And this settling process, so you can do this with me if you're already set as long as you can still hear me, just put your device close by. And you can be again lying down or seated for this part. So as I lie down, there's simply just no suggestion, no instruction from my brain, the thinking brain. No input for now, but simply allowing the settling process for maybe a minute or two. And just allowing the body to show up. Literally allowing sensation to show up, to rise up to the surface. And this initial process, Donna calls it body weather reading. So you're reading the weather this moment, this afternoon. So I'm sensing some uneven tension in the body. So noticing what's showing up in your physical experience. And if there are any information offered by your physical body, from your physical body that is calling for your attention, just making a note without necessarily immediately reacting to it. And as you make a note of your physical experience sensation in the body, checking in with your energy level right now. The underlying animation force, your life force, how vibrant or is it distributed evenly across the layers of your body? So noticing the energy level, and making a mental note without immediately reacting. And allow your attention awareness to drop deeper inside the center of your body, or at least the level of your heart center. And see if you could listen attentively to any emotional experiences that is present in this moment. And also acknowledging any mental fluctuation, any thoughts, beliefs, values that is fluctuating, passing within your awareness. Simply to acknowledge its presence and the messages it brings. If those messages, images, or experiences is asking for some attention, some response from you this afternoon, right now. And checking in, listening to your higher self, that heartfelt desire, your spirits. If there is an intention and you may find yourself needing more time in listening one part before you move on. But through listening through different layers and experiences of your body, from physically to energetically, to emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And this is the moment of consolidation, taking a moment for the body to express how you would put them in a queue, in line, in terms of attention. What is utmost forefront that is requesting, asking for your attention right now, that you can design, reinvent your practice to serve. And making a commitment right now to offer yourself to fulfill that need that your body is craving. And when I refer to body, that's physical body or emotional experiences, or there is a repeated thought that we might have. And as you continue to listen, notice the body may already begin to suggest whether it needs to continue observing, breathing, maybe even putting your hand onto some part of your body that's asking for your attentiveness. Or is there a suggestion from your body that it wants to do a little bit of stretching, movement, twisting, whether it's in your upper half body, lower half body, your legs? And simply allow your body to respond to that suggestion. Now, if there is a craving for rest and quietness and stillness, feel free to transition from here into another restful position. Feel free to use your bolsters, blankets, props to support your lying down or your restorative practice. If there is some emotional unsettling and that you're longing for some groundedness, coming into child's pose or simply having a bolster supporting yourself in child's pose, just for a few moments until the body show up with another suggestion. Now, whereas some of you, if in this moment there is craving for space and movement and freedom, begin to explore simply loosening, circling, rolling the shoulders, coming maybe into all fours and a little bit of a cat-cow. And today in this all fours position, although I mentioned the word cat-cow, what if you allow the body, spine and torso to move in any random direction, movement, from circling like a hula hoop around your waist to asymmetrically moving, bending the elbow, shifting forwards and back, or even taking it into some form of rotation. So really sensing and feeling your way into the movement. Then having to think about what's supposed to come next. And when in doubt, when there is confusion or not sure what to do next, simply pause in a restful position, return to a seated position or lying down position. Simply let the information within your body show up again. Let sensation, information from your body rise up to the surface so that you can meet yourself where you are, to meet and satisfy and nourish that craving. So in speaking for the last almost an hour now, that I'm noticing I needed some space, some stretch and power. Okay? So just beginning to come into all fours. I don't know yet if I want to go into standing poses. I'm definitely wanting to push on something and to sense and feel some power, whether that is emotionally, mentally, physically, sensing and feeling. I don't know yet what pose might come next, but maybe side plank. And where's your body taking you next? Or is it asking you to simply repeat and stay here for a while longer? Every moment I stay in a position or as I'm moving between transitions, information from my body through sensation is flooding in. And all I need to do is respect that information and respond to it. Now, as I sense and feel some sensation at the back of my legs, maybe a little bit of hamstring, is the sensation asking for me to stay, to move deeper into it, or to back off and simply to sit and breathe and wait? That whether I am or you are moving or you're holding a position, that the whole transition, whole practice in itself is meditative. If you're moving, take a moment every now and then to pause. Just in case there are information that's showing up that needs to be heard, that needs to be included, so you have that inclusivity of what the body has to say. Is it asking for a more rajasic or more like active, dynamic movement? Is it asking for you to breathe? Simply notice. Hi, Katya. And in this moment, beyond just physical satisfaction, just notice your emotional experience right now as you're choosing. Your mental experience right now as you're choosing what you have chosen. And once you find yourself, especially if you're moving, once you find yourself repeating, kind of falling back into a pattern, how could you surprise yourself? How would you choose something else that Just surprise yourself. That as we stay in a position or choose to move, transition, that it's simply a whole string of seamless meditation. That in itself is stillness. Movement within stillness. Stillness in the heart. Notice if there's still sensation rising up to the surface that needs to be heard, that needs to be met. So for those of you who are still moving, just beginning to settle into a pause. Take your time to complete your movement. Just returning to a restful position, whether that is standing or seated or lying down. Just taking a pause, another body weather reading, and just to check in. How's the weather right now? Your physical experience of this body. Emotional, mental experience right now. How's your energy level? Recognize that coming to practice is not necessary to have a resolution or an answer to everything, but simply an intimate moment that we are allowing to meet ourselves, to really be seen, heard by ourselves. So physically, attentively listening is nourishing, is simply juicy and nourishing and delicious. So how are we doing as you come back to the screen? Friends say more space in the belly. Yeah, namaste, Barbara. As a student suggestion, how are we doing with the self-practice? And this is the basis of also how I suggest and offer my somatic practices, somatic classes, somatic practices, because it's really arising from the moment. There might be some suggestion, guide ropes along the line. That's why it's a class. That's why there is a guidance, external reference. Whilst having that liberty, having that space to explore, to feel free to explore movement. Yeah, feels good, moving towards a resistance and away again. Yeah, really nice. Yeah. Thank you. So thank you for joining me today. Yeah, thank you very much, Ali. It's held space, safe space for us to continue exploring ourselves and meeting ourselves where we are. So if some of you are free, you can join me at 4 o'clock for the next practice. But for now, namaste. Thank you. Let's let it feel relaxed. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Baroness. Namaste, everyone. I hope you'll join me next week in another conversation and guided practice. Goodbye for now. Stay well and enjoy your practice.